Look, this is a politician and a general. When politicians and generals come on, they have ulterior motives, whether they be, like weapons contractors who are paying them on the low or on the high low, and or running for office. So she's not either of those things. She's trying to actually give it to you straight.
And this is what you'll see when you have reporters that actually go and have to report, or she works in close with folks and what they're actually doing on the ground and not in the studio, getting the talking points together. When you see the realities, and maybe she has her views and her opinions, which she might, I don't know. But if those things don't match up, how do you separate the reality from just what you would like for it to be? And then you have to report about it, and you see someone wildly say something completely inaccurate. It's kind of hard to go, yeah, so I'm gonna build off of that. It's just, it won't feel right. And same thing happened with Harris Faulkner, and it's why you can't always just pundit from the table. That's why you bring in an expert and be like, I don't know what I'm talking about. It's okay to say that.
Yes.
And move on. It's simple. Wow, this hour went by fast, you guys. It's because Francesca was here. Thank you for joining me, Francesca. It's been a lovely day. Maybe we'll have you back on Monday through Friday of next week. We'll decide that then. I'm sure you're game. I appreciate you being here. I appreciate you guys for being here as well. Thank you for watching. We have until tomorrow, man. Tomorrow's Wednesday. And we've got many more stories for you guys. Then up next is the damage report with John Iadarola. And until then, I will be watching.
Hello, one and all, and welcome to another day here at the Damage Report. I am John Iadarola, always have been, probably always will be. Joining me today to break down the news, Abelina Sabrina, welcome to the Damage Report.
Good morning.
It is great to have you here. As always, I will apologize in advance for the sort of news that I will subject you to, but I am glad to have you here, especially you're joining us at very short notice, so much appreciated, so thank you.
Always happy to.
Your background, very different it looks like. You finally transitioned out of the holidays as we cruise into March.
Groundhog's Day is over. We're cruising into March. I accept that we're looking at springtime.
Exactly, we are. Well, unfortunately, we're still in the dark winter of news because the conflict with Ukraine continues. We're gonna be showing you some amazing video of what the people there are currently experiencing. And then we're gonna pop back stateside at how some in the media are processing what's going on. There's some hits and there's some misses. We're gonna focus on a few of those misses. But then after that, we've got bad cops, we've got faked, like people trying to disappear to clear their criminal records. We've got puppy cop assaults. We've got all sorts of stuff. It's a bonkers day in the news. So thank you for joining us as we launch into this. Along the way, if you wouldn't mind hitting the like button and sharing the stream, that would be great so that people know that we're live. And if you want to send us comments, tweets, super chats, all that, we'll respond during our breaks. Thank you everyone for being here. I know that the news can be rough. Appreciate you not checking out. But anyway, with that, Sabrina, you ready to do this thing?
Let's do it.
Okay, let's launch into this.
Is a grandmother and a retired economist. Now she spends her days preparing for battle.
Є вже готові. Іди сюди. Де коктейлі поставили? Показуй.
Okay.
Сховали.
This is where they make the Molotov cocktails? She says she's going to show us them now.
So that is an excerpt from a CNN profile of a grandmother in Ukraine who is originally showing off. We have blankets available for people. We have pickles and other food for people who might need it. Oh, also, here is where we assemble Molotov cocktails. And there's a little bit more on that topic. Here is what she had to say.
These are the only weapons she has, but she says she's ready to fight.
Рашистська наволочка сюди приїжджає.
Let those Russian come here, she says. We are ready to greet them.
How did you learn how to make Molotov cocktails?
На Google помощь.
Google helped, she tells me.
А Майдан?
You Googled it.
Звичайно. А я Майдан.
Of course, she says.
If Russian forces push into the capital here in Kyiv, what will you do?
We will beat them. They won't come, she tells us. I believe in our Ukraine. I believe in Ukrainian people. Moments later, she's off.
Off to assemble anti-tank rounds. I don't know. She's got a busy schedule, that grandmother does. But look, obviously she's providing a place for people to come and get a little bit of help, but also she seems very ready to engage in urban combat against the Russians. Obviously, it is badass. Don't want grandmothers to have to be in that sort of situation. Incredibly scared for how this might end up for her. Sabrina, what are your thoughts?
It's very scary, and I also wish that civilians didn't have to engage in this at all, but I think we're seeing that the Ukrainian spirit and morale is very high. I mean, people were predicting that Kyiv was going to fall to Russia within the first 24 hours, 48, 72. And now we're approaching almost a week now, and it's still under Ukrainian control. I don't know what the future holds, but I think a lot of people are happily surprised that they've been, holding down the fort quite successfully.
Yeah, they very much have been. Apparently, higher morale than was expected. We'll get into a couple different reasons why they've been doing better than originally was predicted. But I want to I apologize if it's a bit of a tangent, but I just want to briefly say, look, so these sorts of videos are fascinating to me because they give us a view of what the experience is like for regular people who are experiencing this. And I'm glad that we have access to it. In this particular case, I'm glad that CNN has reporters on the ground in Ukraine that can do this. But I will say that we don't have video of a grandmother making Molotov cocktails for all conflicts, but that does not mean that the people there don't resist invaders as vigorously and as bravely in all cases, and even grandmothers in Iraq and Afghanistan and Yemen and all of that. This is the sort of thing that you can expect to happen when you invade someone's country and they rightly see you as an invader. We have engaged in multiple wars like this over the past few decades and been shocked to find out that not everyone openly just invited us into their homes as a result of that. People like the territorial integrity and sovereignty of their nations. It doesn't mean that nobody doesn't want to be saved from a horrible leader or something, but you will not always see video like this. That doesn't mean that the spirit isn't the same. So let's bear that in mind in the future when our country tries to sell us on wars that we might engage in. So sorry for the little tangent, Sabrina, but I just want to make sure people zoom out of it.
It's important. It's absolutely important to mention that. I think it's important to condemn imperialism, is even when your own country is doing it, especially right now. It's a little bit scarier as we are dealing with Russia, superpower with nuclear capability. So maybe that's why that's one of the reasons this is getting a little bit more attention. But you're right, there is not video on other civilians making their Molotov cocktails when this happens to them. We don't always have that.
Exactly. Yeah. Even in very similar situations, trying to throw Russia out of their country. I mean, that has happened multiple times. There are multiple conflicts ongoing right now. And there's bravery in trying to fight off invaders in those cases. Now, we do have a little bit more video, and this really gets to what you were just saying about the fact that the defense has been far more vigorous than had been expected. Here's a little bit more. This is a senior international correspondent for CNN, Matthew Chance, showing the apparently relatively fresh, smoldering ruins of a convoy of vehicles.
There has been a ferocious battle here on the outskirts of Kyiv, and this is one of those Russian Soviet-era vehicles which is completely burned out. You can see this is a bridge, actually, is an access point to the northwest of Kyiv, the Ukrainian capital. And the Russian column that has come down here has been absolutely hammered. Obviously, we're still in a very exposed situation right now, but if I can just bring you along here, there's the debris everywhere, the twisted metal of these vehicles. This is obviously just a truck carrying supplies. We saw the armored vehicle in front there. I mean, looking around, absolutely, look at this. I mean, what kind of munitions does it take to do that to a car, to a vehicle? The thing is, what's happened over the past couple of days since this invasion begun is that the Ukraine. Oh, actually, I was crouching down right by a grenade there. Look, I didn't see that. So let's move away from that. Look, I mean, you've got the Ukrainian military that is battle hardened from its fight in the east of the country. They've been fighting Russians and Russian-backed rebels in that region for a long time, and so they know what they're doing.
Yeah, and that is a great point. Obviously, the battles in the eastern portion of Ukraine over the contested territories has provided some training for this. In theory, it also provides some training for the Russians. That doesn't yet seem to have really manifested. But that said, Sabrina, that's sort of the good news from the perspective of Ukraine. We're going to have some bad news, but what did you make of that?
It seems weird to see kind of like a lot of this reporting on just like how badly like the Russians are absolutely being just obliterated by Ukraine, because it's still a very sad loss of life. And granted, obviously Russia should not be invading Ukraine whatsoever. But like, I mean, we were just comparing like Ukrainian morale to like Russian morale. Like a lot of what we're seeing is it's a lot of like young Russian troops, and there are some videos out there that they seem confused as to why they're there, or they don't want to. They didn't know why they were. They didn't know that they were going to be killing Ukrainians. So it does make me quite sad to, even though, like, what kind of weaponry is being used here to just annihilate people like this? It's not a good, happy thing.
Yeah, yeah, you're totally right. In that video, in the variety of videos I've seen, not only did they seem surprised that they're there, but also seem surprised by the response that they were getting. They had apparently, some at least, have been sold propaganda that they are going to be seen as liberators. You know, what historic situations does that remind you of? And they're just shocked that no, the Ukrainians don't want Russia taking over their territory. And you know, I don't greet with happiness any of the deaths on the Russian side either. I haven't seen any polls, but I have to assume that most of those Russian soldiers, very young, like ours, probably would prefer to not invade another country. They'd probably prefer to be safe in Russia. But as in our conflicts, it's not up to them. It's up to the people who will profit, win or lose, that have no real stakes in the game. It's disgusting. That said, it is possible that in the near future, the situation might change, because while initially Russia's having more trouble than was predicted taking territory, holding on to things like airports in some small cities, there's apparently a more than 40-mile long Russian convoy, including armored vehicles, that is moving towards the Ukrainian capital. So it was originally believed to just be 17 miles, now 40 miles. That is a lot of firepower there, a lot of troops, a lot of vehicles. And it's not the only other reason to be worried as well. So Kyiv, that's one of the larger cities in Ukraine, is still under Ukrainian control, but is described as surrounded by their mayor. Cluster munitions have been alleged to be used in residential areas of Kyiv just yesterday, killing civilians. It's just add that to the list of the war crimes that they are guilty of. And so Volodymyr Zelensky has been pointing out that that is effectively state-sponsored terrorism to use those sorts of munitions in a residential area. They're also firing munitions, including cruise missiles, very close to government buildings. And as a result of that, the situation is just very tense. Who knows what could happen with Kyiv in just the next few days, and when that convoy eventually hits Kyiv, what's going to happen as a result of that? Very worried about the next period.
Yeah, I like a lot of people don't know what's going to happen. I hope that the locals can continue to hold down the fort, but that is a huge convoy. That is really, really scary. And it's got to be so hard to, be a Ukrainian in that situation. And, their officials are just begging other countries for help. And the most that other countries can do right now is just offer humanitarian aid and like some military aid. But it would just be so catastrophic if another country actually did put boots in the ground in Ukraine. So this is just obviously it's so much worse for the actual Ukrainians, but it is also hard to watch from the outside, knowing that there's so little that we can do to help.
Exactly, and some of what's being done, there's, I think, legitimate fears about what the effects could be. So, yes. There was the reports of jets that were going to be transferred. Now I'm reading that either the countries are backing off or it might have been misinterpreted. So there are things that are being given to Ukraine, weapons and those sorts of things. Now the question is, all of what's being done, whether it's the sanctions, whether it's the humanitarian aid, whether it's the indirect military aid in terms of equipment, if things continue to go poorly in terms of the assault, how will Vladimir Putin respond to that? It is possible that it could make him more predisposed to some sort of diplomatic withdrawal, being able to claim a win as a result of getting either a neutral status or something like that. Or it could lead to a significant uptick in the brutality of their assault. It could result in yet more threats against other nations. You had over the weekend Russia putting their nuclear arsenal on a heightened level of alert and all that. It is going to be really interesting in one sense to see how Vladimir Putin responds to all of this. And the question that I have for you, Sabrina, and this will be the last thing that we touch on this topic. Tonight we have the State of the Union with President Biden, and he's already said that Russia's going to be a significant part of it, the situation in Ukraine. Is there anything you can think of that you would like to hear Biden say that you think might help in this situation, a stance he could take Because obviously he doesn't have any direct ability to change the situation there, but we are still a world power. We're gonna be important in whatever happens diplomatically.
I mean, I would love to see more humanitarian aid, but I don't. I have no idea what's going to happen next. I mean, there's so little that the U.S. especially can do because people don't want to see, a face-off with the U.S. With Russia. That will absolutely be catastrophic. And so there are a lot of people, kind of scarily enough, like, who seem to want the U.S. to go to war, to have boots on the ground in Ukraine, to take on the Russians, and that would just be mutually assured destruction. That it can't happen, and it shouldn't happen for anybody involved. So maybe more humanitarian aid. I don't know. Maybe if Biden and other countries as well could maybe stop accepting energy such as like oil from Russia. I feel like that might hurt more if they're trying to go tougher on the sanctions. Then I think they're going to have to consider the stoppage of using, Russian resources when it comes to energy. I know that's why like a lot of European countries have kind of like held off on like they're obviously they're taking sanctions in regards to like banking and SWIFT and whatnot, but maybe people need to, take a little bit more of a sacrifice and not accept some of this Russian energy if maybe that could be the next step.
Yeah, we'll have to see. I know the right would absolutely lose it. We're going to talk about energy as a part of this issue in just a little bit. I don't expect and wouldn't be remotely interested in any, like he's not going to say that we're going in or anything like that. He's been very consistent about that. For all the other criticisms that I and others have of him, he's been good in that area. But making it very clear that the sanctions are not going to be some ephemeral temporary thing, I think could be good. Making sure that to whatever extent possible, the sanctions are and this is always impossible. Sanctions never just touch the top. Sometimes they don't touch the top at all. That they hit those people as much as possible and minimize the damage to the Russian people. That would be great. But I don't know. We're going to see. It's one of the most important topics. We're going to have to wait and see how he addresses it and what the right wing response will be. This is the sort of time that historically we would sort of come together to support this country, to stand against getting involved in a war, but also stand against the invasion. I don't know that we have the political system for that right now, the state of the Republican Party. So with that, we are going to take our first break. When we come back, we do have a little bit more on this. A little bit of misinformation we need to check, as well as, again, what effect does our approach to energy production and consumption have on our stance for the war? We'll have that and more after this. Okay, everybody, let's see what is going on out there. Want to give you a heads up, as always, Indisputable will be coming up after our program. So, once Sabrina and I have digested all of the news that we can bear, Indisputable will be coming up. You can have some fun with Rashad Ritchie. Over the members' comments, Mickey C. the Silver-Haired Dragon says, right-wing, violent, hateful fascists here spew their courage with pretending to defend the US. Send them all to Ukraine to practice what they preach like the Ukrainians do. Well, I like the point. Obviously, I am against the forced deportation of people to war zones, but I get what you're saying. Eileen says, Grandma the Terminator. Yeah, it's brave. Again, don't want Grandma the Terminator. I don't want her to be anywhere near hostile soldiers who might hear about this, who might see her with a Molotov and might shoot her. I don't want grandmas being shot. It is very brave. Would love to just have it be a thing that we imagine. Angela R, welcome to your membership over on YouTube. Thank you to all of our YouTube members helping sustain the show in the network. Smiling Dragon has been a member for 15 months now, says, Brett and my birthday is today. Whoop whoop, TDR, best way to enjoy my day. Keep up the great work. Patiently waiting for election coverage later. Yes, so we are going to be doing not only live coverage of the State of the Union, as well as the responses to it, including the response that Rashida Tlaib is going to give for the Working Families Party, but we are then also going to be following along with the Texas primaries. And there's a number that are important, but perhaps none more so than Jessica Cisneros versus Henry Cuellar. It was very close the last time around. We are hoping that she's able to beat him. he was awful even before he was involved in some sort of international sting. So we'll see what ends up happening with that. And you can watch live actually as well. It's gonna be 8 p.m. Eastern time, 5 p.m. Pacific, and it's gonna go for most of the night. Cenk Uygur, Anna Kasparian, myself, and Francesca Fiorentini. So it should be a lot of fun. Mona says, Myrna watching from Toronto whenever possible. Love all you guys. Thank you for what you do. Thank you, Mona, for watching the show. Much appreciated. Gator Dragon has a message in French that I'm going to choose not to butcher, but thank you for it, and says, Happy Mardi Gras Dragons. Thank you, Gator Dragon. I appreciate it. Let's see. Aunt Lynn says, some captured Russian soldiers were absolutely shocked when they were told what Putin was really doing. He lied to his own troops about why they were going to Ukraine. Yes, well, it's hardly the first time. But also, one important factor that we have to bear in mind is that there has been an attempt to control the amount of information that is getting back to Russia about the current state of the assault, about the casualties. So again, these sorts of things are so difficult to know for sure in the midst of a war, but there have been reports of them cremating soldiers who have died rather than sending the bodies back. So do they actually know the current state of it? It is harder to clamp down on that sort of information in the age of Twitter and those sorts of things, but they're gonna do what they can. By the way, Moondragon says down goes Quayar. I hope too, that'd be great. Quantity V says, can we talk about how there's discrimination when it comes to refugees fleeing from Ukraine, specifically Black and people of color? Yes, so we actually talked about that on the show yesterday. It is a real problem, and another facet of the way that there's different lenses that people use to look at conflicts, and this one, for some fairly obvious reasons, some people are seeing very differently. If you're worried about refugees, you should be worried about all refugees. If you're scared for the people fleeing from Ukraine, imagine the people who are fleeing Syria for literally years. And I know our audience is consistent on that, but America could use a lot more of it. With that said, we've got more news. Don't go anywhere. Okay, let's get weird, Sabrina. You ready to get weird?
We're getting weird? Okay.
We are actually. Take a look at this. I'm just gonna transition into it, whatever. Thank you. Joe Rogan had to take down a post inadvertently spreading some misinformation about the conflict in Ukraine. Here is the post that he originally put up. It's a CNN post saying intelligence agencies around the world have spotted American actor Steven Seagal among Russian special forces positioned around the outskirts of Gostomel Airport near Kyiv, captured by Russian airborne troops. To which he put the caption, if I had to guess the plot of this effed up movie we're living through, I would say we're about 14 hours from the arrival of the aliens. So he eventually did take this down because, and I want to be very clear about this, Steven Seagal is not currently fighting for Russia in Ukraine. Neither is Jackie Chan or Mark Dacascos. None of the great action stars of our age are currently fighting over there. We're checking on John Wick. He might be doing some sort of independent operation. So anyway, Joe Rogan put up a new post saying, I deleted my earlier post about Steven Seagal being in Ukraine because it was parody, which isn't surprising, but honestly, it wouldn't be surprising if it was true either. And Sabrina, I want to ask you, is he 100% wrong? Like, it's a ridiculous parody, but Steven Seagal, kind of crazy. Like maybe like everybody falls to misinformation sometimes. Is Joe Rogan 100% guilty here in believing that headline?
Well, it's just this. If he only looked at the screenshot, and that was, I don't get it. But
he did only look at the screenshot because he'd know if he looked into it that ain't true. But continue.
No. But the fact that even upon taking it down, that like he kind of somewhat doubled down and was just like, but it could be true. I wouldn't be surprised if it was true. It's like, that's just the most Joe Rogan thing to do, even when it's proved that what you were just talking about was debunked, Yeah.
Yeah, I think it is actually. And I will say not only is it the ultimate Joe Rogan thing, it is my preferred Joe Rogan thing. If Joe Rogan is going to be spreading misinformation, this feels like fairly innocuous misinformation in comparison to stuff about masks or vaccines or God knows what, climate change. who gets to identify as black. I prefer this sort of thing, honestly, because the only victim maybe is Steven Seagal. And I've long since stopped caring about that. So if he's gonna do it, it should be about this. By the way, before the original post was deleted, it garnered over 400,000 likes and 11,000 comments. And he did the right thing. He deleted it and he put up a correction. However, how many of the people who clicked like on that will see the correction, will not come away spreading the idea that Steven Seagal is going undercover, doing judo to Zelensky or something like that? That's sort of my fear there.
Wow. Yeah, I don't think a lot of people are going to see that correction either.
Yeah. By the way, final thing. No, continue.
No, I was just gonna say, like you said, like it's the least harmful compared to him spreading like the vaccine misinformation and not even issuing like as many corrections. So that was all. I was just agreeing with you.
Exactly. Yeah. Now, and I also want this to serve as just a reminder. Just like search a little bit extra. Like that's the sort of thing where it would have only taken about a minute to know for sure. And I get it. Like there's a lot of stuff that hits, and it's like, oh, geez, like what if I had told you that there was a grandma telling the Russians if those Fs come here, we're gonna blow them up with our Molotovs. Well, that was real. That was real. So is it any crazier? Just check. Just check. Especially if you are incredibly influential, if you have the ability to generate 400,000 likes on. I mean, I can make claims about aliens fighting in Kyiv. Ain't gonna hit millions of people before I can delete it. That's all I'm saying. Okay, with that, let's turn to more insanity. On Fox News, they are scrambling to take what's going on in Ukraine vis-a-vis Russia and turn it to their own purposes. And they found a few ways to do that. I want to focus on one today, and that is using the conflict there and the sort of geopolitical situation around it to attack anyone who believes that we should be investing in renewable energy. Anyone who thinks that we should even have as some sort of aspirational goal, cutting down our consumption of fossil fuels. And that has been like all over Fox News. But specifically, I think it reached what I hope is its lowest point with this.
This is the irony of letting children like Greta Thunberg take up shelf space in your brain. Think about all the adults that took her opinion over the progress made in fracking or drilling or the necessity of coal in nearly every country. But no. How dare you? Remember that? How dare you? We all sat there. Oh, maybe she'll drop solar panels down into Kyiv to save people. It's not going to happen. China and Russia must have been laughing at us when we were allowed to be lectured on world affairs by a 14-year-old. Oil is a world affair. Energy is a world affair. Fuel is a world affair. We got to wake up to that. We also got to get back into the nuclear world. The anti-nuke ideology put us in a hole for many decades. It's probably the greenest fuel that we will ever see. The sooner we get back to nuclear, the sooner we were almost energy independent. Right. Remember the good old days? Yeah.
Yeah. Just to be clear, we were not like based on the nuclear power that we had 3 or 4 decades ago. We were not energy independent as a result of that. I don't even know exactly what he's trying to reference there, Sabrina. But he is very frustrated that we listened to Greta Thunberg and that we allowed her to jujitsu us into some sort of oil-based conflict with Russia, that we have allowed her to dictate our energy policy, and now we have to be involved in these sorts of situations because of her.
That's so funny that he would make that dumb joke about like her dropping solar panels on another country, as if Russia wasn't just saying, the International Space Station, it could,
that's true.
On this country, true. Like, come on.
I'm glad that you remembered that, or that you brought that up, because I don't know if that was what was on his mind. It is, I mean, like he's a full-grown adult, technically. Let's be clear about that. A wealthy, full-grown adult. This is his entire career, is trying to be either funny or insightful. And someday he's gonna be one of those. He decided to attack her and implied that if you think that renewable energy would be a good thing, then, well, why in a time of war, why don't you just drop some solar panels on them? Well, actually, right now it might not be terrible because there's the possibility that either through conventional weapons or some sort of hacking, Russia could do significant damage to the energy grid of countries that they're attacking. Having some sort of home-based solar actually might not be that bad of an idea. It's also not what is being proposed. Let's be clear. He also started off that little screed saying this is what comes of allowing her to. He said something like living rent-free in your mind. Let's just remind you, he brought her up. If she is living rent-free in anyone's mind, it's Greg Gutfeld, not those who are unfortunately making the energy policy here in the US. I wasn't planning to talk about Greta today, maybe when we get to the IPCC report in a little bit, but he's the only one who decided that talking about a teen activist made sense in the context of this military conflict.
Yeah, he's got to stop letting this young teenage girl live in his head. He's just being weird to make her the center of that conversation.
By the way, not only is it weird as part of his focus, like he is doing so much additional work to either not understand what it is that she wants and that what other environmental activists, whether teen or not, want. But to misconstrue how it would actually function. He's saying we need to be energy independent. You know, it would be a great way to work towards that? Needing less fuel, needing to import less oil. Wouldn't that be great? Oh, it also has the side effects of reducing, our carbon emissions, helping fight against climate change, reducing pollution, all those sorts of things, making the US an actual big part of what is going to be inevitably, regardless of what the five wants, a massive industry in producing these sorts of things. We could be a part of that. So they simultaneously are fighting for us to be energy independent, but also attacking one route that we could actually do that, and that others could too. If you're worried about Russian aggression, if you're worried about all of that, well, stop being so tied in with them via needing their oil exports. It's like they're punching themselves in the face in their attempt to make the left a villain, even when the left is advocating for things that they say they want to.
No, absolutely. Like capitalist motives aside of like not needing to rely on other countries like for their oil, it will be better for the planet, for slowing down climate change, which will affect all countries, everybody, every living being. So yeah, like you said, they're punching themselves in the face. And if anything, it's a stronger argument as to why we need more renewable resources and we need to step away from fossil fuels.
Exactly. Yeah, the fight against it, like if you could talk to one of the conservatives that's watching one of these shows that wasn't so caught up in the fact that they consume all this misinformation like so much, if you could detach them for a few weeks and ask them, hey, why is it that the US shouldn't be independent, that we shouldn't manufacture these sorts of things and then free ourselves up and also have cleaner air, cleaner water? Why are you against that again? I don't think they would know. They just know that they're supposed to be. They know that if you talk about like wind turbines and you talk about solar panels, they're supposed to laugh. It's supposed to be a joke. I don't think they actually understand why. Anyway, with that, we're gonna turn to a related topic because he brought up Greta. So you know what? We are gonna talk about the environment. The IPCC 6th assessment report has come out focusing on the impacts, adaptation, and vulnerability to climate change the world over. You can see a little shot of their website there, and I show this to you so that you know that at ipcc.ch, you can actually go to this if you want to dive into these different areas and understand the nature of the threat that we face as a people. It's there. I will bottom line it for you though. It's not good. And why wouldn't it be? We haven't done anything since the last one. Wouldn't that be weird if suddenly it's like, oh no, actually the glaciers are like way more solid now. We don't have to worry about it. The oceans are receding. No, that's not what happened. The report finds that climate change is affecting every person's physical and mental health and classifies nearly half of the entire global population as being, quote, highly vulnerable to climate impacts, which can come in a variety of forms, as we will describe. The report concludes, by the way, that it is no longer possible to fully adapt to some global warming impacts. Irreversible losses are occurring among some warm water coral reefs, coastal wetlands, and some rainforests. And once ecosystems reach their hard limits, people will be directly affected as they lose the benefits these natural systems provide. That's one of the things that we often forget in this, is that the destruction of these sorts of things isn't gonna be limited to like arable farmland. These parts of the world that are being wrecked serve a purpose in their own right, and we're gonna be losing that. And to give you an idea of some of what we face, deadly heat stress could affect up to 76% of humanity by the end of the century. Up to 3 billion people around the world could face chronic water scarcity if world leaders fail to meet the goals of the Paris Climate Accord. And there are obviously many other effects other than that, Sabrina, but I think that's a good launching point. What do you think about this? Will anyone listen this time around?
Right now, I don't think so, unfortunately. They should, because I think maybe people are more focused, understandably, on global events. But the thing is, with climate change, it's only going to ramp up more fighting across countries and whatnot, because like as resources get diminished, people are going to be gravitating to wherever they can survive, and we're going to continue to see more conflict. So if people will want to say, well, climate change should not be a priority, we've got potential wars happening, it's like, well, let's look a little bit more long term. Let's look at the future of the planet. Let's look at the future of humanity. How is humanity going to survive? Not only just like breathing with the weather, but like the future wars that this is going to create.
Yeah. If you're totally right, we have this opportunity right now where people recognize, hey, major powers invading each other, not a great thing. Okay, well then how about we, before it's too late, stop producing a world that's going to be far more conducive to that, where like, do we think that countries are gonna do less invading when they have a harder time feeding their population, when they have a harder time getting clean, fresh water that they need access to? No, this is gonna result in not only a lot of strife inside of the borders of countries, but between them as well. Resource wars are going to be effectively like the story of our time for the rest of this century, and we are just barreling towards that situation. And it would be bad enough if we didn't see it coming. Like if we were suddenly smacked by some sort of dark asteroid that no one could see, that would be a tragedy. But when you see it coming for a really long time, that's what Oscar nominated movies are made of. And as in that, we have all the information we need. This is the 6th of these reports. They keep coming out. We have some responsible people, whether on the activism side or elected politicians, that are trying to get through to us. And what happens to them? AOC talked a lot about the Green New Deal. Greta Thunberg is one of many high-profile activists. How are they treated by the media at large? They're laughed at.
I mean, we just saw how they were treated. They're trying to make the cause for climate change. They're trying to distill it to, oh, it's just this young girl. She doesn't know any better. She's gonna drop solar panels on this country, and that's how she's gonna save the world. Like they're trying to make this hyperbolic enemy to their cause in order to make it just seem so irrational. Like, no, we can't have a cleaner planet. No, we have to care about what's happening right now. And the thing is, they just don't care. They just don't care, because they're not going to be around probably by the time, we feel like the more harsh effects of climate change. It's all for one to them.
Yeah, I think it's two-pronged. It's one, the first one that you just said, that a lot of the absolute worst, most apocalyptic effects, they don't care. These are people that largely don't care about the vast majority of the people that are alive right now. We expect empathy for people who aren't yet born. That isn't how they work. But we are going to experience a lot of bad effects of climate change. I got news for you. We are right now. Obviously, I'm in California. It's generally on fire these days. So that already exists. The thing is, all the people doing the attacking are as insulated from those effects as possible. Like my knee-jerk reaction is to say, Greg Gutfeld, you're broadcasting the 5 from New York City. How interested are you in canoeing to work someday? But the thing is, they'll just flee. They're a-holes, but they're rich a-holes. And they know it. Like Donald Trump lived in New York, now he's in Florida. Both are gonna be absolutely devastated by climate change, but they'll move. Like And they will have the ability to. Others will lose their homes. They will lose everything. They'll be wrecked financially when the time comes for them to finally flee, when the flooding gets even worse than it is already. But they're insulated from it. And so we get no empathy. And what they're effectively doing is the same as what they're doing on so many topics, wasting our time, muddying the waters, trying to sheepdog as many people as possible into not caring until it's too late. And unfortunately on this topic, as much as any other topic I can think of, they have been incredibly successful for literally decades. Any final thoughts, Sabrina?
No, it's just exactly what you said. It's a problem for normal working class people who don't have the means to just up and uproot their life and move to wherever will be safer. I mean, and even then, who's to say, even if you could move, like how affordable will it be to move to these safer places as we continue to see climate change for the worse? It's not going to be accessible to normal people. Only the rich will be able to survive. And it's unfortunate because they don't seem to be the ones who are doing much to actually advocate for climate change.
Exactly. Yeah. Why don't they like, they're so good at following the profit motive. Make some solar panels, invest in some of the technology. And I use that obviously as short script for a wide variety of technologies across multiple different forms of renewable energy generation. But they've just got it too good when it comes to oil and coal. As of right now, they've got it too good. Well, the report is online and great reporting is available in a variety of sources. So if you are interested in this, the fate of our planet, feel free to go look that up. In any event, we're gonna take our second break. When we come back, we've got disappearing police chiefs, we've got puppies, we've got an absolutely awful cop block for you. So don't go anywhere, we'll be right back. Okay, everybody. By the way, I see someone in the chat saying I would love to watch Mar-a-Lago go underwater. Well, like I have no interest in anyone suffering that because of course when Mar-a-Lago goes, many others will go. But someday you will be able to scuba to the site of one of the presidents who took up years that we could have spent doing something about this. Probably not us. We'll have been killed by water-seeking marauders at that point, but someone will scuba. Anyway, let's see what's going on out there. Debbie Bauer has been a tier 3 member for 14 months. Thank you for that, Debbie. Much appreciate your support. Sean Payne, member as well. Thank you for joining us on YouTube. Marcus Otera says, I'm so sick of Gutfeld and his noise and how he's constantly slouching and man-spreading like a baboon during debates and discussions. Unless I'm thinking of someone else on faux noise, and I'm not sure. They have some overlap. There's a weird Venn diagram of their male personalities, but yeah, I am sick of him. The pathetic attempts to like imagine if Greta was like on the side of the truckers or whatever in Canada. Like how much would he want that 14-year-old to be the one that we're listening to? And again, I get it. You're gonna support some, not support others, but he's just a wealthy guy who's protecting his economic interests. And unfortunately, along the way, he is getting a lot of people whose economic interests are not being served by the status quo to go along with it. Gary Steelman says, newsflash, John Iadarola is reporting aliens are fighting in Kyiv. No, I took down the post, so don't worry. It only got 100,000 likes, so I am not guilty. What are the chances that Steven Seagal, after seeing the news cycle about this misinformation, tries to go and fight? Can you imagine?
I mean, if he can get a flight.
Show? Yeah, that's true. That's true. He'll sneak in across the border on his own. Vicky Gray says, a mind is like a parachute. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work if it's not open. Agreed as a general principle. Sometimes minds can be too open in some ways. You do need to exercise some critical thought about what you integrate into your worldview, obviously. Bird of the Kiwi Dragon says, we need to give you guys press passes. We need actual journalists to ask pertinent questions, e.g. over climate change, and someone other than the White House should get to pick who gets them. It would be absolutely great. I would love for that to happen, but we don't seem particularly close to it at this point. We will have to see. Hero to Zero, RN Dragon, thank you. I see you gifting subs over on Twitch. Thank you for that. Quantity V says, can we talk about how there's, okay, we read that, thank you, yes, and we will continue to watch out for that. Nicole Purple says, knowing someone who had family back home, there's a sad thing too. She was a pharmacist I worked with once, but her husband was still back in Ukraine at the time. I hope all is well with her. Yes. There have been, I saw some report from the Ukrainian government. They said at that point, 1,600 casualties. I mean, God only knows in terms of lags in reporting, and the situation is obviously developing. Like, it's the weird thing, like as Sabrina and I are recording this right now, those tanks are rolling towards Kyiv right now. Like, God only knows what damage they're doing along the way. And the fear of the people in these cities as they wonder what's gonna happen, it's devastating. HRLP has been with us for 21 months on Twitch and says she reminds me of my mom. Gotta love the Amazon box in the background. It's been so painful watching my homelands crumble under imperialist pressure, but she's encouraging. I assume it means that there was an Amazon box behind the grandmother in Ukraine. I did not know that. I didn't notice it anyway. Pixelated Bunny's been with us for 16 months, says, love you guys so much. Thanks for keeping me semi-sane. Semi's enough. Thank you. Ashmanil here for 20 months says, couldn't use my Prime sub last night, so John gets it today. Thank you. We'll be back. Sophie didn't think I was gonna make it. It was a close one, but I did. Okay, with that, Sabrina, again, let's get weird. A little bit less kooky, but still weird. Okay. We've got more police chiefs behaving badly. In this case, really badly. William Anthony Spivey is an ex-North Carolina police chief who faked his own death, allegedly via suicide, to evade consequences for the criminal charges that he is facing. So thankfully he has been found, that's how we know about this. But the Horry County Police Department put up this notice saying that he had been arrested, saying that there had been community tips that had led them to him. Last spring, he was relieved of duty due to a misconduct investigation. He was charged with over 70 felonies, including evidence mishandling, drug trafficking, and embezzling. This is the individual, by the way, William Anthony Spivey. So what actually happened? Well, facing all those charges, he decided, nope, I'm out, that's it, I'm done, deal me out. He was reported missing in Columbus County, North Carolina back on February 21st after he failed to return from a fishing trip on the Lumber River. The investigators spoke to Spivey's friends and family at the scene, and quote, family members described the incident as a possible suicide. Along with the boat, the investigators collected handwritten letters and a .22 caliber rifle with a discharged round still inside. After 3 days of searching and collecting video from surveillance systems and conducting interviews, it became even more apparent that the suicide was staged. Investigators were able to track him to an apartment complex in Loris, where he was taken into custody. You know what? Sometimes, Sabrina, it just all gets to be too much, but I don't know, you did the crime. According to the idiom, you're supposed to do the time. You don't get to just disappear. And if you are gonna disappear, you should go farther than the next town over. What do you think?
What? A police officer evading the consequences of their actions? I am so shocked. I cannot believe it. Mm-hmm. I wonder what he thought was gonna happen. And this guy was chief? Wow.
Yeah, no, he worked his way up and apparently used the opportunity to engage in all of the most fun crimes, I guess. But like, we didn't on the pre-show this morning. We talked about another police chief who had used apparently used the N-word at a crime scene, and he was now being investigated. It was a murder scene. I believe the body was still there, and he went there and just decided to casually drop some racial slurs. Just because they're in charge doesn't mean they're better. It can mean that, but in practice, look at this guy. Like, he got into this position of power and abused his authority, probably along the way too. And then when the time came for justice, he decided to stage, like, not only like I can't stress how laughable this is. If it wasn't clear, there was a boat, there was a gun, and a shell had been discharged. But did he not think that when there was no body there, that would be suspicious? What is the idea that he went there, shot himself, and then wandered off to make it interesting? I don't even understand what the plan was. Was he Was he hoping to give rise to like the next, like the greatest unsolved mysteries or whatever? They're gonna see through that, buddy. And he's a police chief. If anyone should know that, it's him.
Yeah, if anything, he probably should have just made it seem like an accident and not necessarily like leave behind like a suicide note like that. Cause yeah, where would you go from there? All your stuff is still there. Yeah, I don't know what he was thinking, but
yeah.
clearly not the best and brightest over there, huh?
No, not at all. And like, how do we expect a system to be reformed when the people who would, at least hypothetically, let's say we were to try to reform it, these people would be in charge? Like, we need to change the way that cops are trained and all that, obviously. But we also need to go through the leadership. Like, these are the people that are setting the culture for the, like, what do we expect that the cops working under this guy when he was a police chief were like? What were they doing? If they were breaking the law, are we supposed to hope that he was at least taking other people's crimes seriously? It is difficult to imagine how a system like this can be reformed. And as we transition to our next story, that is gonna buttress the point even more. Let's jump into this. The mayor of Minneapolis, Jacob Frey, had at one point supposedly banned no-knock warrants. This is something that we have talked about multiple times on the show because of the sometimes disastrous results from the way that no-knock warrants have been done. Well, supposedly they were banned and yet still open in the direst of circumstances. When it's most important, when it's an emergency, okay, then you can still do it. Well, they did it in this case to track down a stolen puppy. They used a no-knock raid in a dog napping case. Again, most important. And by the way, I'm a dog lover, but still, bounds of reason on using tactics that regularly result in innocent people being killed. So as in many of the other cases, including, by the way, with Amir Locke recently, video is available, body cam footage. And in the video, it shows MPD SWAT team members ramming and blasting through the front door of a home, smashing side windows in a pre-dawn no-knock raid just last year, well into the period when they are no longer supposed to be using these tactics. You can see a shot from it right here. Just 6 seconds into it, an officer with a breaching shotgun begins firing rounds through the door as another officer runs around the outside of the house, loudly smashing windows. I am assuming as a distraction, that seems logical to them. Officers zip-tied the two residents, a naked man and a mostly naked woman, and put them on the couch under a blanket. SWAT officer says on the video, "I would have to say that we've been very cordial. There's a search warrant going on, okay?" So I will give you more details. I want to allow Sabrina to respond to this. Again, this is overall to try to respond to the fact that a dog had been stolen.
The fact that he called that very cordial, and like I've seen the video too, like the images don't even do it justice how violently their home was broken into when no-knock raids are supposedly not supposed to be happening. They're I mean, they announce themselves. It's not like they're kindly knocking and being like, "Hello, please." Like, no. They are shooting at their door. And for what? Because of a dog napping, which technically is a property crime because dogs are viewed as property. So it was just absolutely unwarranted on so many levels. They're scarring these people, and it could have gone so much worse. Like if people, like what if the residents were armed in their own home, which they have the right to do so? It could have gone so much worse. These raids are so disgustingly violent and dangerous, and they should not be happening.
Well, I mean, look, you bring up that possibility. We know exactly how that could go down. That's how it went with Amir Locke. Amir Locke had a gun, which he is apparently allowed to have. That's what the right always tells us, in his own home. People bust through the door, shining flashlights, and begin shooting as soon as they see it. Now, thankfully, in this particular case, it's just horrific. It's not murderous, but I want to catch you up on the rest of the details. The man, Marvin Johnson, of the two that were stopped by the police, was arrested and charged with aggravated robbery and possession of a firearm by a prohibited person, and has since pleaded not guilty. The dog owners reported that a man stopped outside their house, had asked to hold their pit bull puppy, then ran off, but not before slipping and dropping a gun out of his pocket. His girlfriend told police that he had gifted her the puppy and that she had no idea how he got it. She was not charged, but said that she and her 4-year-old son had been evicted over the damage caused by the SWAT team. Again, all of this, as Sabrina rightly points out, in pursuit of the perpetrator of a property crime. And by the way, Minneapolis Police Sergeant David Swierczewski says in his report that the no-knock raid was warranted because a weapon had been used in the original crime and Johnson had prior convictions. Okay, I understand that you are using that as an excuse to do this because apparently you guys just so love this tactic that you are desperately looking for any reason to justify one. I guess it's an exciting way to spend the night. Is that the only way that you could have pursued this? So the belief is that this guy who stole a dog, which by the way, well, is alleged to have stolen a dog, which is wrong, don't do it, and had a gun on him when he did it. It fell out of his pocket. They believe he definitely has another gun. And so we need to bust into his house in the middle of the night to stop him from killing cops pursuing him over stealing a dog. Again, like whether it's regular people with guns doing stand your ground or these cops, the way that they view how people will respond makes no sense to regular people. The assumptions that go into their decision making. And if they are really worried about this guy shooting at them, startling someone in the middle of the night and busting in their house seems like a really weird way to avoid that harm. Sabrina, what do you think?
And that's the thing. I don't think that they were actually looking to avoid harm. I mean, I have to imagine that on some level, some of these people actively like doing these raids. It's the most action that they probably see.
Guess, yeah.
I mean, they're doing this for a puppy. A puppy. Their intention was not to minimize harm whatsoever. Speaking of puppies, yeah, just disgusting on their part.
A little surprise guess there. Yeah, don't steal dogs. That is a bad thing.
Yeah.
This is worse, and for this to happen constantly and it to be used in an obviously well-documented, racially discriminatory fashion, for them to be so ready to use violence if there's any justification for it, just don't do it. There are other ways to arrest people, and I know that because when it's like a high-profile financial crime, generally they're not busting down the door of their penthouse apartments in the middle of the night. They believe that they can probably bring the people in there. This guy stole a dog. He didn't just commit a terror attack. There's no reason to believe that he's necessarily going to be immediately violent, unless you believe that certain people will be, which they clearly do. Okay, with that is gonna be the end of our first hour. So if you're on our linear platforms, thank you very much for watching. But if you're on YouTube or on Twitch or on our members app, don't go anywhere. Don't go anywhere. Because I'm still gonna be here, Sabrina's gonna be here. We're gonna be talking about a lot, including Supermarket Karen, the Pope, and more after this. Welcome back, one and all, to what remains of the show. We got the serious stuff out of the way. Don't worry about that. We talked about war and we talked about cops doing what cops do, Sabrina. But now we get to have fun, sort of, right?
Fun, sort of. Let's go.
We do. And the first bit of fun before we jump into the news is to talk about a little celebration. Today is a very special day for the TYT community. Brett's birthday. Does everyone know that? I think I saw some people talking about it on Twitch, but Brett Ehrlich, the bringer of the fun, the host of the Happy Half Hour, the game player on Game Changers, has turned 50. And it is a great day. He looks pretty good for his, I mean, not great. Like, let's keep it real. It's the pandemic. But everybody, I would love to see on the YouTube streams, on the Twitches, some recurring shout outs for Brett as we launch into a full day of content on the TYT network.
Happy 50th, Brett.
Happy 50th. It only happens once, or maybe every year when I announce it anyway. But happy birthday. I look forward to seeing Brett in the near future. Brett and I and his lovely wife, we used to do trivia together every week for like a solid couple years. And now I've seen them for like 8 minutes since 2020. So it sucks, but hopefully the 50th birthday, that can be a reason. I mean, it's your half century, it should be celebrated in person. Okay. Anyway, for those of you out there, let's see what's going on with you. Ghost Dragon says, let's get weird. Let's get weird. What movie? I don't know, actually. I'm not sure what that's a reference to, but I do appreciate you making it at me. Melissa says, I meant to say Minneapolis instead of St. Paul. I think. Says, is this the modern Keystone Cops? Look, it's just, again, I think that Sabrina's really onto something. I think it's exciting. And look, it's also dangerous. Like, I'm not saying that there is never a reason to do it, but the dog napping is not the reason. And if you're gonna do it, be incredibly careful about who you're doing it to. That's one of the parts of the Amir Locke situation that is such a tragedy, is that it never should have involved him in the first place. Anyway. Brian says, after hitting the 13th month at tier 3, thank you for that. Says, my dragon continues to grow. Thanks for all you do at TYT, including bringing on amazing guests like Abelina Sabrina. Thank you. Abelina is one of the most fun people that we have gotten to meet over the past few years. So Abelina, thank you for your work. Oh, by the way, as we were talking about in the break, Sabrina's been doing a lot of streaming recently, including around Russia. So tell us a little bit about your Twitch channel and where people can see that.
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me on twitch.tv/Abelina Sabrina. Lately, we have been covering what's happening with Russia and Ukraine. And granted, I don't know everything. I think a lot of people have been making predictions and they don't know everything. So I kind of try to have the approach of, we're all going to be watching this news anyway, and it feels a little bit less tense to watch it together. So that's kind of the approach that I've been taking.
No, I think that makes sense. Community is incredibly important at all times, especially when people are like maxed out on their stress meter.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's see. Star's View on Twitch hit 14 months. Says, going to miss live shows, stay safe, stay sane. Thank you. That's okay, we'll be here when you have time. Biggs hit 12 months, thank you, Biggs. Carefree gifted 5 tier 1 subs, you're the best. Thank you to all of you. And with that, let's jump into the rest of the rundown, regrettably starting with this.
Do you have an issue?
No, I'm just reading the book.
Okay.
I like this.
Okay.
Anything that's in front of my face is my business.
Okay.
Let's see what kind of germs I get from you people. You have to have germs.
It's people like you that are spreading germs.
You must be having something, maybe you
No,
got
I'm
no
not.
teeth.
No, I'm not.
You look anything?
No, I'm asking no opinion.
Yeah, no, it's still happening. You still come across these sorts of people, especially as in this case, if you are Asian American and you have a population that was always predisposed to racism towards Asian Americans amongst many other groups, but now especially over the past 2 years has been told by some of the most formerly powerful people in the country that it is totally cool to be racist against Asian Americans, especially weaponizing the misinformation that you've heard about the pandemic. And so there in this supermarket video, you see this woman saying, I wonder what kind of germs I'm gonna get off of you people. And so look, this is a small sort of thing, I get it, but it's a lens into the experience that people have every day, that the anti-Asian racism that in many cases escalates to violence has not abated. We're gonna get to the stats in just a little bit, but Sabrina, I don't know why we can't even stand in a line at a supermarket without being at least civil to each other.
Well, the fact that she even, of all the insults that must have been just stewing in her mind, the fact that she would try to claim that they were germy in that kind of way, like that kind of language is what allows other people, when you talk about it like that, it makes you like view a certain type of people as dirty, as lesser than, and that is how you get into like more severe racist territory, obviously, but more violent territory. And that's how people feel justified in, I mean, granted, luckily it didn't escalate to violence in that grocery store, but there have been so many violent attacks on like the Asian American population lately. And so I am really disgusted by her use of the word germy, even though it's just a conversation at a store.
Yeah, well, by the way, also, again, expecting logic is probably a waste of time here, but if you are so worried about these germs, put on a mask, take it seriously. I love that these people have that fundamental never-ending hypocrisy. That I'm like, and by the way, this is sort of on the individual level between two individuals, one racist, one Asian American. But the people like Fox News back in the day, they've sort of moved on from it, would do a bunch of segments about how COVID is it's the Chinese government's fault. It's a bioweapon from them. They designed it to kill us, and you shouldn't do anything to stop from getting it. Is that a weird turn that they would always make? And you can see it manifested in this woman's behavior. Well, really fast, I want to acknowledge the person who posted this at the Twitter account. Dion Cosmos says, today was the first day I've ever been hate crimed. A woman came up to my family as we were checking out and was calling us the C slur and saying we were spreading germs. She wants to see the kind of germs we spread, and she doesn't understand why people come to other countries. Goes on to say the smirk on her face was the ugliest, most disgusting thing I've ever seen my entire life. This is my and many other people's reality of living as a minority in America. Please share this if you can so her disgusting, ugly face can be known by everyone, and let this be a reminder of the reality that minorities face every day. That like we don't, I was in line at a supermarket recently, and the guy in front of me was a pastor, and the line was taking forever, and so we chit-chatted. It was just nice. That is possible. I don't expect that for everyone. You can just not say anything. If you are absolutely filled with rage and suspicion and fear and anger, shut up. How about that? How about not putting it on another person? You can just stew in that anger while watching Tucker Carlson each night and Sean Hannity and Laura Ingraham. You don't then have to go put it into practice in your everyday life. You can treat people civilly. At least I've never found that to be difficult to do, Sabrina.
I haven't found that difficult either, especially because at the grocery store, I'm not going to the grocery store to make friends. I just want to get in, get out, get my stuff, pay. That's it. So just, especially if you're gonna have that like stewing in your brain, don't talk to anybody. But
100%.
maybe just don't talk at all. I'm busy.
Yeah. You know, I was at a cafe with my wife last night. We were going to get some food, and there was a big group in front of me at the line, and they took forever to order. And do you know what I did?
What?
I waited. Just waited, and then I ordered my food afterward, and I had a tuna sandwich. That's it. I just waited, and it was fine. That's what I did.
You survived.
Unfortunately, other people can't do that. I did survive, but I want to make sure that you know that the violence we alluded to earlier is still a massive problem. Anti-Asian hate crimes increased 339% nationwide last year, a huge increase into 2021. And you can see that in cities across the country. The surge was actually significantly higher than it was in 2020, when there was already 124% increase compared to the year before. And take a look at some of these individual cities. New York went from 30 to 133 anti-Asian hate crimes, a 343% increase. San Francisco went from 9 to 60, an almost 600% increase. LA went up 173% as well, which is a reminder, by the way, that not only is this a problem that is happening, but it's also happening in some of the cities that we might anecdotally think of as being a little bit more progressive in some ways, certainly more diverse, more cosmopolitan. You still see these sorts of attacks happening. Any other thoughts, Sabrina?
No, absolutely. I think you're right that, we're seeing those in these cities because they're more diverse. And I mean, if there were like higher Asian populations in other parts of the country, maybe like in the middle, maybe that number would be like even higher. But yeah, it's New York and Los Angeles. It's not like the blue liberal progressive haven that people seem to think it is sometimes.
I agree. Well, I thought, especially considering our talk about some of these conspiracy theories and misinformation about the origin of it and how that has played into these racial stereotypes, there's an important bit of news that broke just a few days ago related to that. From the very beginning of the pandemic, there has been one question that some have focused on almost to the exclusion of anything else, which is specifically, where did COVID come from? Like, we know it came from China initially, specifically Wuhan. But more specifically than that, was it a lab leak? And so over the past year and a half or so, you have seen endless speculation and conspiracy theories evolving from this. And by the way, one of the reasons those proliferated as much as they did is it is not impossible to imagine that could have happened. Countries do develop biological weapons. It is a thing. It's regrettable, but it does happen. So it is possible. Some, though, like that is the only thing that they can think of about the pandemic to care about is it happened from a lab, which means that the Chinese government did it, so we get to demonize them. Also, Fauci somehow was involved, so we can attack him. Well, look, it never really made sense to do that, even when they thought they had the evidence that had come from that. But apparently, that evidence is not robust. And one other explanation, what you might have initially heard of when the pandemic began, that it happened in one of these so-called wet markets. More data pointing to that being the origin. Scientists just in the last week released a pair of extensive studies that point to a large food and live animal market in Wuhan as the origin of the pandemic. They concluded that the coronavirus was very likely present in live mammals sold at the Huanan seafood wholesale market in late 2019 and suggested that the virus spilled over into people working or shopping there on 2 separate occasions. One of those involved in the studies, a co-author, says, when you look at all the evidence together, it's an extraordinarily clear picture that the pandemic started at that market. And if you want to get into their findings, you have literal like breakdowns of the individual stalls where they found COVID. There are heat maps of how it was, it sort of moves out from those positions to other parts of the market. And in fact, they specifically go into, it's gonna be beyond the bounds of this show, but different strains of the coronavirus. And they have mapped out the spread of those different strains in a way that makes sense timeline-wise that this was the origin of it. So just putting it out there, if anyone even cares anymore. I know some people have moved on from the very lucrative discussion about the lab leak thing, but Sabrina, the scientists seem to think this is where it came from.
I mean, I just think that it's impressive that science has evolved in a way that we're even able to trace it that deep to the individual stalls. That's amazing. But yeah, I don't know how many people are actually all that concerned about where it's come from. But I do think that that's amazing. I think that's good. And it can, put to rest the whole lab myth about this at least.
Yeah, and I don't know if that'll help with any of the racism specifically, because many racists here in America have been perfectly willing to attack Asian Americans when they thought it was coming from the market too. But maybe it'll help fight back against a little bit of the xenophobia, specifically sort of trying to gin up opposition to the Chinese government to try to increase tensions between our countries. That has been a sort of convenient boogeyman for not only the right, who almost all believe that we should have a more tense relationship with China, but some Democrats as well. It's a convenient way to move forward that narrative. Doesn't seem like there's a lot of evidence behind it though. I don't know. Thankfully, Sabrina, that has been one thing that I haven't seen a lot coming out of Biden. You had the trade wars between the Chinese government and ours under Donald Trump, but so far it seems like Biden hasn't been as willing to dive into that sort of thing.
Good. The bar is low, but good.
Yes. Finally, by the way, I want to give you just one more excerpt from this. By the spring of 2020, senior members of the Trump administration, you might recall, were promoting the idea that it had escaped from the Wuhan Institute of Virology. There's no direct evidence that the new coronavirus was present at the lab before the pandemic. Researchers there have denied claims of a lab leak, which, by the way, we might expect that they would do. But if you're going to continue to claim that it came from there, you have to provide some sort of evidence for that. And when you don't have that, and the evidence is robust that it came from the market, I think we can probably safely conclude that that is where it came from. Okay, with that, we've got one more story that we're gonna talk about. Before we do that though, I do want to respond to some of your comments. Pitchfork's Dragon says those tanks are actually out of gas. I think they're referring to the destroyed vehicles in the convoy from earlier. I'm not 100% sure. Robert Wilson says it's my birthday too. Happy 50th to both of us. Thank you, Robert, for being a part of this celebration. Happy birthday to you and happy 50th to Brett, as we said. Over on Twitch, let's see. Ascension Dragon says convoy stalled outside Kyiv, running out of gas, and a surprise of spikes and burning tires are at the ready. The Italian job was right, never mess with Mother Nature. So I think that was, again, the one that was in the video, not necessarily the 40-mile long one. But people in the chat are talking about more and more reports coming out of heavy equipment being abandoned. By the way, Sabrina, did you see the video going around of the farmers towing I think it was like an APC or something like that on the side of a road?
Yeah, with like a tractor or?
We didn't show that video because it's the sort of thing where it's like, it's too good to be true. I didn't trust it enough to actually show it, but pretty amazing stuff.
It's still funny to look at the very least.
Exactly. Get it together, Russian military, Jesus, or don't actually, please don't.
Yeah, don't.
Anyway, okay, let's see. YTP Renewed says, how is it even legal to evict someone for property damage caused by the cops? Shouldn't the cops have to pay the cost? That seems reasonable. So in the dog napping case we just talked about, we described how, I guess as a distraction so that they wouldn't know exactly what direction the cops are coming from. Cops are running around the outside, bashing in the windows. So they just have to replace the windows after. That could be hundreds and hundreds of dollars at the very least. And that's assuming you just damaged the glass. It is absolute madness that you would put that on those people. And like the woman, she said she had no idea where the dog even came from, which certainly seems plausible considering that the guy stole it. I doubt he would have told her that. Putting it on them is just absolute madness. And now they're gonna be affected by that. They have now been evicted. That is something that can continue to haunt you for some time, make it more difficult to get housing in the future. All of these are the sorts of things that one might consider before doing these tactics if you actually cared about the human cost of what you're doing. The frickin' says TV tower in Kyiv struck, services down. Jesus. Okay, let's see. Kyle says, what I want to see Biden do is to actually explain why he's doing the actions he's doing and not doing, and explain it clearly and forcefully. This is one of the few times I actually think he's been doing really great in this situation, and he's getting roasted for it. I think that we will see something like that because, of course, State of the Union addresses are very carefully scripted, prepared for days, if not weeks in advance. I think they're going to have to be very clear about what the strategy going forward vis-a-vis Russia is going to be. We will see, and also I am sure making it very clear that the number one goal is, well, specifically avoiding nuclear war, but avoiding any sort of military conflict directly with Russia. And I'm assuming probably shooting down what's been going around on social media a lot, the casual claim that we should establish a no-fly zone, being made by people that I'm not sure understand exactly what a no-fly zone is or how it's enforced. Anyway, with that said, Sabrina, let's talk about one more thing. Thank you for that. Pope Francis has announced a change to the paternity and maternity policy at the Vatican. Fathers will now get some time off. Isn't that amazing? I mean, here in the US, we don't generally do that. Certainly not at the federal level, we don't get that. So look at the Vatican being more progressive, but only slightly more progressive, as you will see. In a law published earlier today, Francis amended the Vatican's family leave policy. So under the policy as established, mothers already were entitled to 6 months maternity leave at full pay, which they can extend by another 6 months at half pay. So that's okay, that's certainly competitive with the rest of the world. Parents who adopt a child are entitled to a similar benefit. The new law sets out a 3-day leave for new fathers at full pay. So that's good. They don't cut you down to half for the 3 days. So that's cool. Like as a father, I am very interested, or as a prospective father someday, I do want to spend time with my kid, but not like a lot of time. Like after 3 days, you're probably gonna be pretty bored, Sabrina. So it's convenient that I'll be able to be like, hey, I'd love to stay, but they only gave me the 3. Thank you, Pope, by the way, for that. But yeah, good luck with that kid, and I'll see you on Saturday. What do you think?
You're gonna be bored and you're gonna be tired. You're gonna miss out on your sleep. 3 days with little to no sleep. Like you gotta have an excuse to go back to work. It works out real great. But that is wild. I didn't even know that mothers got 6 months at full pay and then an additional 6 at half pay. That's way better than how mothers or any parent what they get here in the US. So
Definitely.
it's very comical how they can have like such great time off for the mothers, but little 3 days for the fathers. That
exactly. Yeah, it's so weird that like they have a relatively awesome leave policy for the moms, but not the guys. So I want to show you how it's currently breaking down worldwide in terms of this. So you can see in this map, effectively, what you don't want to be is in the orange. So the darkest orange is going to be 0 weeks. Hey, what do you know? That's us. But there are some places where you get 24 weeks or more. Hey, look, Russia. They're being kind of progressive when it comes to the leave. So you can see, of course, across Europe and Canada too, and Australia, New Zealand, a couple of scattered countries in South America, a little bit of leave in the west coast of Africa as well. But there is still a lot of work to be done across the world to become better on this. And we had this ridiculous battle over the past year where the Democrats were supposedly going to push for it, and then they jettisoned the entire thing. And it sort of reached its high point with the fight over Pete Buttigieg, where right wingers tried to hold him up as an example of how ridiculous it is that fathers would want to spend more than like 10 minutes with their kid. Well, if the Vatican can get it done, if they can get us to 3 days, I think that America, the wealthiest nation in the history of the world, can do slightly better. Any final thoughts, Sabrina?
You would think, wouldn't you? We can. We certainly have the capabilities. Will we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
By the way, I am suck says in the chat, babies can't even play board games. I know it's gonna be really rough for a few years. And like the second they're capable of moving stuff on a board, we're diving into Hero Quest or something. Anyway, I wanna thank Sabrina for taking time out to join us. Sabrina, are you gonna be streaming later on today, or what should people look forward to?
Yeah, I will be streaming a little bit later on today if anybody wants to hop in at twitch.tv/Abelina Sabrina.
Thank you as always, and I hope you have a good one.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
For those of you at home, Indisputable is gonna be coming up in just a few minutes. And then, of course, full day of programming culminating in our live coverage of the State of the Union as well as the Texas primary, where Jessica Cisneros is gonna be taking on Henry Cuellar in a rematch. Gotta get him out of there and get Jessica Cisneros in. So we're gonna be doing live reaction. We're gonna be covering not only the speech, but also the reactions. Rashida Tlaib is gonna be giving a speech. This is obviously a critical time in terms of international news. So it's gonna be really exciting to see what they have to say. So everyone stay tuned for that later on. But until then, stay safe out there, stay sane out there. We'll see you soon.